Association of Nigerian Students issues 2-week ultimatum to federal government and academic staff union of universities to end strike. 2 Catholic priests kidnapped in Anambra State. In international news, 429 have died in Indonesian tsunami, rescue efforts hampered by heavy rain. And in sport, Onazi sustains Achilles injury, could be out of AFCON.
This is ANN News.
I am Olajumoke Olatunji. The National Association of Nigerian Students, NANS, have issued a 2-week ultimatum to the federal government and the Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASUU, to end the strike and get ready for a confrontation. ASUU commenced its strike in November after the lecturers accused the federal government of not honoring previous agreements. ASUU has had several meetings with the federal government, but both parties have been unable to reach an agreement. The union leader said the strike has affected students' academics and has caused mounting accommodation costs. He also said the strike could disenfranchise students from participating in the 2019 general elections. The students have threatened a mass protest across the country and the mobilization of 100,000 students for a protest in Abuja. 2 Catholic priests have been kidnapped on Monday by unknown gunmen at the Umeru area of Anambra State. Sources say the clergymen were abducted while on the way back from Onitsha to prepare for the visit of Francis Cardinal Arinze. The police public relations officer in the state, Haruna Mohammed, said the patrol team attached to Otocha Division has recovered a car abandoned on the Umeru Road. The car is said to belong to a reverend father who was allegedly kidnapped by yet-to-be-identified gunmen. Mohammed said security personnel were working to rescue the victims. President Muhammadu Buhari is asking for evidence that his government is being run by a cabal, as claimed by his wife, Aisha. The president's wife had earlier granted a media interview where she says her husband's government is being controlled by a cabal, not allowing him to push Nigeria to a greater level. She says, quote, "The president does not know 45 out of 50 of the people he appointed, and I don't know them either." Despite being his wife of 27 years, she further said some people are sitting down in their homes, folding their arms, only for them to be called to come and head an agency or a ministerial position. The Akwa Ibom State government has finally given President Buhari access to use the Godswill Akpabio International Stadium for campaign activities scheduled for Friday. The state government had earlier asked the president to use Uyo Township Stadium for his campaign. It claims to have denied their earlier request because the stadium's maintenance company had closed for the year and that a Nigerian Premier League match was due to hold at the stadium early in January. Akwa Ibom Commissioner for Sport, Monday Uko, explained that the state's annual Christmas carol last Friday night in Uyo took place in the Township Stadium instead of the earlier proposed Godswill Akpabio International Stadium for the same reasons. The People's Democratic Party has called on President Muhammadu Buhari to sack service chiefs after Boko Haram's attack on Kukareta community in Yobe State and the worsening security situation in Zamfara State caused by armed bandits. Boko Haram fighters had attacked a military base in Kukareta on Christmas Eve, where they engaged government forces in a gunfight before being repelled. A terrorist also reportedly set ablaze a clinic in the community as residents fled their homes. The opposition party also said the development had shown that President Muhammadu Buhari's strategies to end insecurity in the northeast had failed. The federal government has received the report of the 7-man committee set up to investigate allegations of fraud against the Executive Secretary of the National Health Insurance Scheme, Professor Usman Yusuf, with a pledge to implement the recommendations accordingly. Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Boss Mustafa, received the report of Presidential Independent Fact-Finding Panel on National Health Insurance Scheme from the chairman of the panel, Dr. Bukar Hassan, for onward transmission to President Muhammadu Buhari. Details of the report were not made available to journalists, but the SGF said the government's decision on the panel's recommendation would be made public later. In October, NHIS Board Chairman Ifeanyi Enyenatu, with the permission of the Minister of Health, Professor Isaac Adewale, suspended the Executive Secretary.
On behalf of the President, President Muhammadu Buhari, I received this report with deep sense of appreciation to all of you. And I assure you that the report will be expeditiously processed for implementation.
The Department of Petroleum Resources in Akwa Ibom State has sealed off 46 fuel stations for under-dispensing of petroleum products and for operating without licenses. Head of DPR operations in Eket, Olusegun Dabo, says some of the fuel stations had been operating illegally for more than 6 years without approved licenses from the agency, while others had no signpost. He said the name of the defaulters will be given to other sister agencies for further prosecution. He also said the defaulters have up to a month to repair the pump before restarting the operations in the state. Coming up, African stories, a violent protest after journalist set himself on fire. And later, international news, 429 have so far died in Indonesian tsunami.
You are watching ANN.
This used to be me. But that was before I got the perfect bag. It's handy and easy to use. All I need in one compact space, just like my MTN Extra Value plan. I used to get one plan for my calls and then try to remember which data plan worked for me. Roaming was a totally different ballgame. Not anymore. I've got the MTN Extra Value all-in-one plan. If you're a data buff like me, you get extra data with some talk time. And if you like to make calls, you get extra talk time with some data. And when I'm abroad, I automatically browse, chat, and call right on the same plan. MTN Extra Value was made just for me.
More of data or calls, whichever one you prefer. MTN Extra Value is made just for you.
Whether in your house, at your office, on your phone or online, we are there. We have the facts behind the headlines. We cut to the chase with the news you really need. We cover every angle. We are the bigger, better news network. We are African News Network. ANN. Watch ANN News on MITV from a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. In African stories, violent protests have followed the death of a Tunisian journalist who set himself on fire and called for a revolution over poor living condition and corruption. Abdulrazak Zorgi's death has triggered protests in Kazaran, a provincial city. The protest could potentially spread to other cities, and clashes between protesters and police erupted for the second day in the country on Christmas Day after the journalist's self-immolation. Zorgi had posted a video online before setting himself on fire. In the video, he lamented unemployment, poverty, and corruption. He died on Monday after being taken to the hospital. After Zorgi's funeral on Tuesday, renewed clashes erupted in the impoverished city, 165 miles from the capital, Tunis. The National Union of Tunisian Journalists said Zorgi had died protesting what he called difficult social condition and a lack of hope. The union was considering a strike. 8 years ago, a similar event took place in which a street vendor, Mohamed Bouazes, had set himself on fire to protest the same problems: unemployment, corruption, and repression. Christmas in the Sudan was marked by violent protests in the streets of Khartoum against President Omar al-Bashir's 3 decades as leader of the country. At least 3 demonstrators were wounded on Tuesday when security forces lobbed tear gas and fired gunshots to disperse protesters. Some of the gunshots and tear gas were fired to bar protesters from marching on the presidential palace. Reuters news agency reports that eyewitnesses say 3 protesters had been wounded by gunshot, one of them in the head. Officials had previously said 12 persons had been killed, even though the claimed security forces had exercised restraint and had dealt with the protesters in a civilized manner. Amnesty International contradicted the report by saying close to 40 persons had died. An explosion believed to have been caused by a car bomb went off when a suicide bomber targeted the entrance of Libya's foreign ministry on Christmas Day. 3 persons were killed, including a prominent military leader, identified as Abdurrahman Mazogi of the Revolutionary Brigade. Officials say a second attacker was shot dead by guards before he could detonate his explosive device. The health ministry confirmed the death toll and said 10 others were wounded. Meanwhile, the so-called Islamic State had claimed responsibility for the attack. Sierra Leone police have reported a 10-year-old girl has died after undergoing female genital mutilation and an initiation into a secret women's society last Wednesday. This has sparked renewed calls for the practice to be banned. Police say the women in charge of such initiation had been arrested as investigation is continuing. The 10-year-old was said to have died after losing too much blood after undergoing the FGM. 67 other girls whom a local activist had reported to have also been initiated are awaiting medical examination. Female genital cutting is prevalent in Sierra Leone as part of girls' initiation into secret societies. United Nations data show that 9 in 10 women in Sierra Leone have been cut. Sierra Leone is one of only a handful of African countries which has not outlawed the practice that has been internationally condemned. Evictions of bona fide land occupants by landlords and agents in Buganda and Buyoro regions of Uganda have been stopped by President Yoweri Museveni. The president says no such evictions should take place during the Christmas and New Year festive season. He said his order takes into account unscrupulous land agents and individuals who use the holiday period to conduct the legal evictions, knowing government officials are out of station during that period. Land Minister Betty Amonge has directed local council leaders to resist the implementation of any eviction court orders without the physical presence of the issuing magistrate or judge. Amonge says her ministry is working on comprehensive guidelines detailing procedures to be followed before conducting any evictions. She said these guidelines will curb the emerging anomalies. And striking junior doctors and radiographers working in public hospitals in Zimbabwe have vowed to continue with their job action despite threats by their employer in an adverse weekend court ruling. Following an application by the Health Services Board, HSB, the Labour Courts declared the strike illegal at the weekend, and Labour Court Judge Betty Chiziza ruled in favour of the HSB, which hires doctors. She said doctors offer an essential service and cannot engage in collective job action. The doctors immediately accused the HSB of negotiating in bad faith. The Zimbabwe Hospital Doctors Association said in a statement that the HSB has negated and reversed all the progress so far made to terminate the industrial action. It said it has suspended all negotiations with HSB and Ministry of Health until such a time that an honest, comprehensive and satisfactory offer has been preferred through the tripartite negotiation panel. When we return, international news, 429 have died in Indonesian tsunami. In later sport, Onazi sustains Achilles injury, may miss AFCON 2019.
You are watching ANN.
Are you sure you want to do this?
Adam, go and bring us your husband. Okay, hello baby. We're in this together, okay? Can you hear me? Keep coming forward. Wait, stop. You okay, lean to your right. Keep walking down. Keep walking to the left. Yes. You're almost here. Keep going. You are here. Wow, you did it.
I'm just so glad I didn't have to use my cane to do this.
And I am so glad no other man got you before me. Let me be your eyes.
We will never stop working to give you a network you can rely on so you can enjoy life's special moments. MTN, everywhere you go.
We are on the road every day, canvassing throughout Africa for news you really need. We follow the story everywhere, from every corner of Nigeria to the wide African expanse. We bring you what's making headlines. We connect you with news you can use. ANN, African News Network, in a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News and World News. The Indonesian tsunami has claimed at least 429 lives so far. The disaster was caused by the side of a volcano that slipped into the ocean over the weekend. Relief operations have continued for thousands of victims, including many who have been rendered homeless. The latest tsunami followed one triggered by a quake that struck just 3 months ago on Indonesia's Sulawesi island. An estimated 2,100 persons were killed in that one. Indonesian authorities warned on Wednesday that continued volcanic eruption there could trigger additional tsunami. Head of Indonesian Meteorology, Geographics and Climatology Agency, Wikaturama Kanawata, says eruption, high waves and heavy rain were possible on Wednesday. A Singapore newspaper reported that a fresh volcanic eruption at the Anak Krakatau has sent residents fleeing from coastline areas. Indonesian President Joko Widodo has promised a new early warning system by next year. The current system is reported to have broken down since 2012. A second migrant child had died in U.S. custody, the second this month. An 8-year-old Guatemalan migrant boy died early on Christmas Day after being detained by U.S. border agents. A report says a border patrol agent had noticed the boy displaying signs of illness. The boy and his father were then taken to a medical center where he was diagnosed with and treated for common cold and fever. He was released. They said that even the boy was reported to have been vomiting and was returned to the hospital where he died on Tuesday. Border Patrol officials say the cause of death was not known. Identities of father and son were not released, but they had both been in custody of U.S. Border Protection. Early this month, a Guatemalan girl, 7-year-old Jacqueline Call, died in custody after being detained along with her father by U.S. Border Patrol agents. U.S. President Donald Trump says the partial government shutdown will continue until there was an agreement on funding for a wall on the U.S.-Mexico border. The U.S. government partially shut down on Saturday, and there has been no breakthrough in talks to reopen the government agencies affected by the shutdown. Trump said on Tuesday he wouldn't agree to reopen the agencies until he had a wall, a fence, or whatever else lawmakers may call it. Funding for about a quarter of federal government programs, including Departments of Homeland Security, Justice and Agriculture, expired at midnight on Saturday. With no deal forthcoming, it is believed his shutdown could stretch into the new year. Trump campaigned heavily on the issue of immigration and made the wall one of his major promises. At the time, he had also promised that Mexico would pay for the wall. Mexico immediately said, no way. Democrats are very opposed to the wall idea now that they will take over the U.S. House of Representatives in a week. Trump's border wall idea faces an uncertain future. Oscar-winning actor Kevin Spacey has been charged in connection with an allegation that he sexually abused an 18-year-old boy at a bar more than 2 years ago. Court documents show the actor will be arraigned at Nantitu's District Court early in January on a single charge of indecent assault and battery on a person who is at least 14 years old. Spacey released a video on YouTube on Monday asking people not to rush into judgment without facts. The 3-minute video makes no specific reference to the Massachusetts allegation. Pope Francis celebrated Christmas Mass at St. Peter's Basilica and called on the world to see differences as a source of richness instead of danger. He also called for reconciliation in places torn apart by conflicts. The Pope delivered the traditional message to tens of thousands of people in a sunny St. Peter's Square. Security was tight around the Vatican for the Christmas season, with military jeeps stationed at key access routes. Tourists had to undergo metal detector and bag searches. Last week, police in southern Italy arrested a Somali man suspected of having been a member of Islamic State. He was also said to have threatened to bomb churches in Italy, including St. Peter's. In his address, Francis, the first pope from North America, called for fraternity among people with different ideas, yet capable of respecting and listening to one another. He said God wanted love, acceptance, respect for his poor humanity of ours, which we all share in a great variety of races, languages, and cultures. Up next, sport. Onazi sustains Achilles injury, may miss AFCON 2019. Stay with us.
You are watching ANN.
If you know fit go internet or follow for Twitter, you know fit snap photo send or get it photo send. Now because you dey use Palasa, your phone no dey answer. See me see wahala. My brother, go get smartphone, yeah. Drop that Palasa phone. Phone wey no go for your hand, yeah. Drop that Palasa phone. Phone wey no fit take selfie. Drop that Palasa phone. No be correct phone, yeah. Drop that Palasa phone.
Upgrade to a smartphone today and get double data for 6 months on any MTN data bundle you buy. Simply purchase a smartphone from any store, anywhere in Nigeria, or bring your current smartphone from any network. Insert your MTN SIM card to start enjoying your double data bonus. Offer is open to all new and existing MTN subscribers. Join the largest smartphone movement today.
Make it not for your hand, that's Palasa phone.
Welcome back. This is ANN News and Sport. Trabzonspor FC of Turkey has confirmed that Onyenyi Onazi, Super Eagles midfielder, will undergo surgery for a ruptured Achilles on the Monday. Onazi cured the ruptured Achilles in the Turkish side 4-1 win on Sunday. The 25-year-old was taken off the pitch on a stretcher in the 32nd minute following the injury. He's out of play for the rest of the season and may not appear at the 2019 AFCON. And that's ANN News this evening. For details on this and other stories, visit our website, annafrica.net. Conversation continues on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ANN Africa TV. I am Olajumoke Olatuji. Have a pleasant evening.